the bottom of Pei Amud Aleph.
Yeah.
And we're learning today Pei Amud Bet. We're going to have 3 sections today in the learning. First, we're going to continue talking about Ashiurim from the Mishnah. We said Devek, Seyar, different measurements we'll talk about. And then the next section, the major section, is going to be Sid. Sid they used to use as, well, one of the things at least was for beautification. The Banot would use Sid. One of the reasons was to remove hair.
We said that.
We're going to speak about the machloket, exactly what it is. And then we'll start, Bezat Hashem, if we have time, the next Mishnah, the Bani Pei Amud Bet, talking about Adama, Kanim, different things, and also the Shiurim with those. Okay, so Bezat Hashem, we are starting. The Gemara is Devek Kedei Liten Berosh HaShafshaf. It's 7 lines from the bottom of Pei Amud Aleph.
לא אמרנו שעבה?
שעבה כדי לתת על פי...
דבק. Oh no, שעבה זה parentheses. Take it out. דבק. כדי ליתן בראש השפשף.
מה זה שפשף?
שפשף is a board.
board.
נסר. מסרים.
כן.
So, the Mishnah had said, how much devek, glue, להיות חייב בהוצאה בשבת, כדי ליתן בראש השפשף. Tana, so the Braita explains. What does that mean? כדי ליתן בראש השפשף שבראש קנה של ציידים. So Rashi explains, we need to put on the top of a board of the reed of bird hunters. Mazeh. Very interesting. You look at Rashi explains, it sounds like the bird hunters, they wanted to catch birds. So what did they do? Emayu samim kanim, these reeds, like sticks in the ground. And on top of it, they put a neser, they put some sort of a board, shaf, that's what it is. And on top of the board, they put glue. And then when the bird would land on the glue, like a rat trap, like they do, a trap. Now Rashi explains, because for
they still have it. They're still doing these traps.
With they still have it.
Yeah,
they're
putting in the house like those with the glue.
For things like that, right. So that's the amount of glue that they would use. It was a lot of glue that you'd be chayav for Hotzah b'Shabbat because that's the minimum chashivut of devek. That's the Mishnah is saying. Beautiful. Yeah, let's continue. Tana, zefet v'gofit kedei la'asot. So the Mishnah said, zefet v'gofit kedei la'asot nekev. Kedei, לעשות נקב. אז המשנה אמרה, כדי לעשות נקב. מה זה כדי לעשות נקב? So we explained in Rashi there, and the Gemara here explains, we're talking about a kli that holds mercury. Kaspit.
Okay.
So it's a liquid metal.
Usually it's thermostat, no?
Like a thermostat. We're not talking about, they didn't use it, I don't think they used it for thermostat necessarily, but they used it in a very small measure, because it came out with liquid. And so what they would do is they would make a tiny hole in the kli, take out exactly what they need, and then fill it up again. Okay. So to fill up that little hole, that's the amount of zefet v'gofrit, of, how do you translate zefet v'gofrit? Pitch and sulfur. That's the amount. Tanak, kedei la'asot nekev katan, for mercury, for it to come out. Same idea, a very small amount. Okay, עכשיו, היה לנו מחלוקת במשנה, חסית, כדי לעשות פיקור. So we had in the Mishnah מחלוקת. Let's see again, what was the Mishnah? It said like this. Chasit is crushed bricks. זה כמו clay, similar. כדי לעשות פיקור של צופי זהב, זה היה התנא קמא. How much crushed bricks? כדי לעשות פיקור של צופי זהב. Remember we said, it's like clay. They would take this, they would put it around the oven in order to put the bellows. How do you say bellows? מפוח. Inside of it. So this is a certain amount of crushed bricks. The amount that you use to make that clay seal, essentially, on the core, on the crucible, on the oven, that's the amount that's chashuv. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, כדי לעשות, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, כדי לעשות פטפוט. מה זה פטפוט? פטפוט is a tripod. Okay? פטפוט. לא יודע מה מולד פטפוט? Probably not today. Probably in Hebrew say tripod or משהו כזה. לא יודע. How do you call this?
זה?
Yeah.
Stand there. I don't know.
Not tripod.
מעמד.
Okay. Kitzer, Rabbi Yehuda said, how much of this chasit do you need כדי לעשות פטפוט? Now, Rabbi Yehuda is very interesting. Which one is saying a bigger measure? Kedei lasot pi for the oven, or kedei lasot a tripod? Which one is more? Rabbi Yehuda is saying a larger measure.
Yeah.
The problem is, הבנת את זה, מתן? הבנת המחלוקת? כמה חסית להיות חייב להוצאה בשבת? חסית is crushed bricks. It's כמו clay. It's similar to clay.
Okay.
Don't matter.
חרס.
So Tanakama said, כדי ליתן על פי נקב קטן. סליחה, כדי לעשות פיקרו של צופי זהב. מה זה? שהאבן, there was an opening and they would put the bellows inside. אבל כדי the hot air wouldn't come out, they would put some clay around it to seal it. It's a little bit. Rabbi Yehuda says, כדי לעשות פטפוט. Now pטפוט is a tripod. The stand, basically. That sounds like more. Pashut, that's more. So it seems like who's the Mekil in the Mishnah?
According to the Mishnah, Rabbi
Rabbi
Yehuda.
Yehuda, Pashut. The problem is, which we're about to show, is בתחילת המשנה אמרנו שרבי יהודה הוא השיטה שהכי מחמיר.
כן.
אני רוצה להסביר את זה, איך הרדב"א מסביר את זה. Okay, how does he explain it? If you look at the beginning of the Mishnah, we had a machlokת about Gemi. התנא-קמא אמר, Gemi זה flexible reeds, זה כמו plastic, you could call it, Gemi, okay. כמה Gemi להיות חייב, הוצאה? כדי לעשות תלאי לנפה ולקברה. To make a loop in the kitchen, you hang the nafa or kvara, the sieve or the sifter, they made a loop on the wall. Now, that's a larger amount. Rabbi Yehuda said, how much? No. Kedei litol mimenu midat min'al likatan. How much gemi to be chayav for hotzah b'Shabbat? It was like a measuring tape, basically. They would measure the kid's foot and then bring it to the min'al, the person who made shoes, and then he would make a shoe. Now, that is smaller than the tal'ai l'nafa or l'kvara. So the Ritva explains the following. From that we understand what is really the yesod of the machloket between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. The yesod is as follows. You have one item, aval yesh lazeh two hishtamshut that are both mitzuyot. They're both normal usages.
Equal.
Similar usages. One is more common than the other, but they're both common.
Okay.
This is the case. This is the machloket be'etzem.
Okay.
In Yesod. Tanakama holds we follow the more common use lekula.
The more common use.
Lekula. What does it mean to say? Let's just take that in the case of the gemi. Since gemi is more often ze yoter matsui used for the talai, and that's a larger amount. Memela we're making like that. That's what we're going to follow because it's yoter matsui. Af sheze gam kein matsui for the measuring of the foot of the baby. Not as matsui. Rabbi Yehuda holds since it's also matsui to measure the foot, which is a smaller amount, the chashivut is given for a smaller measure. V'zeh chashivut shelo lachmir.
Rabbi Yehuda אומר, אם זה both of them matsui, I go by the small management.
Even though the smaller one is
less
matsui,
but still is
and it comes
matsui.
out to be a chumrah.
That's
זה המחלוקת בין רבי יהודה, וזה איך הרדב"א הסביר את זה.
אבל השאלה היא כמה זה מצוי.
הרדב"א מסביר ככה, מה המחלוקת ביסוד בין רבי יהודה ותנא-קמא במשנה? Because we're going to speak about this 2 more times, so let's just chop it. According, the מחלוקת is באופן שיש לך דבר, איזה חפץ, איזה דבר, שיש לזה שתי השתמשות, אבל אחד מצוי יותר מהשני. אבל שתיהן מצויות, meaning they're both normal usages.
Okay, but one is more popular.
One is more popular.
Okay.
Shav, Tanakama says, look, if the one that's more common is a bigger amount,
We go by
להקל, you follow that bigger amount.
Okay.
אז אתה לא חייב על השיעור הקטן.
זה מי אמר?
תנא-קמא.
תנא-קמא.
תנא-קמא הוא מכיר בעצם. תנא-קמא הוא סובר לא.
רבי יהודה.
רבי יהודה, סליחה, רבי יהודה סובר no.
Since they're both common.
They're both common, and the
But
one,
small.
in this case, let's say measuring the child's foot, which is smaller, is also common.
Ladies are hard.
אז אנחנו מחמירים to say you're חייב even in the smaller amount. זה המחלוקת ביניהם. אוקיי.
What's the, okay, Rabbi Yehuda is a bit gray area, why? But this is common, both, like for Rabbi Yehuda. This is more, right? I go by the law. This still common, but look the difference.
Okay, so
How much? What's
I
the?
guess that would you have to know exactly what's lo matsui. What's already considered lo
זהו,
matsui.
אתה מבין?
אבל אני אומר מצוי, אז מצוי.
שומע שאלה, okay. Let's just take that for granted.
So Rabbi Yehuda, if they both matzui, I go by the small measure.
להחמיר, like
תראה
the
מה אומר
small
בערבית,
amount.
יוחאי.
Okay?
תראה מה
עכשיו,
רושם בערבית.
זה הרדב"א. הרדב"א מסביר את זה. עכשיו,
את המחלוקת
לפי זה.
בין קלקם לרבי יהודה.
עכשיו, לפי זה, לפי ההסבר. He says, the Gemara is going to ask, but wait a second, because in this case, what was the machloket in this case? לפי התנא שמע, לפי התנא how much chasit להיות חייב? It sounds like just a small amount.
פי הכור.
ורבי יהודה סובר, how much to be חייב? לעשות הפטפוט, לעשות הטרייפוד. So who's really saying the bigger amount?
רבי יהודה.
רבי יהודה, so that's the kasha. The kasha the Gemara says, לפי היסוד שהסברנו, שרבי יהודה סובר, even the smaller amount להחמיר if they're both מצויות, why would he say over here the larger amount, which is בעצם הכולה?
But they're both מצויות?
That's what we're saying.
They're both מצויות.
That's what we're saying. He לכאורה holds you go להחמיר even if one of them is less common.
1 second, it's the same
That's the
pitput.
kasha.
There is one
Pitput
pitput.
is a tripod, yeah.
There is one kind.
At this point we're saying pitput is a tripod, that's it.
מה זה טרייפד?
That's it. A stand with 3 legs.
חצובה,
But
חצובה.
it's a tripod.
חצובות שאתה שם,
זה סטנד.
שהיו עושים את זה בשביל דגלים,
כן.
או עושים את זה בשביל כל מיני
כיפה,
זה
דברים.
נקרא חצובה?
וגם היו שמים על זה...
אתה יכול לשים חצובה.
ovens.
על חצובה גם כן הוא אומר לך, אתה יכול לשים קירה.
זה כמו סטנד כזה.
אנשים, אתה
אבל
זוכר שהיינו
הבנת-
הולכים עם הגזייה הזאת הקטנה?
כן,
אז יש
אבל
לה את המעמד.
הבנתם הקשה, חבר'ה, הבנתם הקשה? הבנתם? לפי מה
אבל השאלה היא
שהסברנו.
איזה פטפוט יש לך, יש לך אחד גדול, אחד קטן.
Okay, but we're assuming any pitput is
It's
more than...
bigger than
pitput.
for sure.
Pitput is nothing, it's a tiny
אבל
amount.
מה זה פי הכור? the cover?
יש לך oven, שאתה שם metals and it melts inside, ויש לך המפוח שאתה רוצה להכניס בתוך האבן, הקוסבל קוראים את זה. אבל הבעיה החור, זה יותר גדול מהמפוח, ואז מה הבעיה? אם אתה תשים את זה מפוח...
יצא אוויר.
כן, זה הבעיה. אז הם היו שמים קצת חסיד,
Just to make sure that it doesn't...
just to seal it in a way that the hot air is contained.
So איך זה
It's a
מסתדר?
small amount. Says the Gemara.
אז רגע, בוא נחשוב.
Okay, so that's...
איך זה מסתדר לפי רבי יהודה?
Says the Gemara, so I sort of explained that I learned the Mishnah, you're going to remember it. So let's, says the Gemara, Chasid כדי לעשות פיקור. He says like this, how much Chasid, this is Tanakama, כדי לעשות פיקור, רבי יהודה אמר לעשות פטפוט, which is more. Asks the Gemara למימרא דשיעור רבי יהודה נפיש, שהשיעור שסובר רבי יהודה להיות חייב, נפיש זה יותר גדול, נפיש is greater, it's bigger.
זה
Is that
הקשיא.
true?
זה
Is
הקשיא.
that true? Hakai malan, but we paskin earlier in the Mishnah, the shiura de Rabbanan nafish. Actually, when there's both mitzuyot, Rabbanan are the ones that say the larger amount. The Tanan, and Rabbi Yehuda is the machmir. Like we learned in Ayin Chet Amud Aleph before in the same Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, how much gemi kedei litoli menu midat minal katan. And the Tanakama said that that's not the measure is to make a talai, which is a larger one. So it seems to be a kashya based on our understanding of the shita. So the Gemara answers, no, when Rabbi Yehuda said kedei lasot pitput, it doesn't mean to make the stand mitchila, it means if there's cracks in the stand, אני חושב שאני אמרתי את זה לפני זה, to fill it in. It's like you see a little hole in the wall, you fill it in.
Patching.
So that's what it means. And that actually is lachmir, that's actually less.
Smaller than the פי הכור.
That's actually less than pikor, to fill in the cracks.
אז למה אתה אומר את זה ככה אבל? תגיד את זה יותר.
one second. אימה כדי לסוד פטפוט כי רק קטנה.
אבל הוא אומר כדי לעשות פטפוט, הוא לא
To
אומר...
fill the cracks of the tripod for a small oven, and that's actually much smaller. So this actually comes out to be a shita, and we'll get back to that another time. We have another machlokes, B'ezrat Hashem.
אבל למה אתה אומר לי כדי לעשות פטפוט?
Because that's the language of the Mishnah.
לעשות אותו, אבל לעשות אותו זה
מה
ליצור
לעשות
יש מאין.
רבי יהודה אומר כדי לעשות פטפוט, אז אנחנו מסבירים
לא ממש לעשות.
לא לעשות, אבל לתקן את הפטפוט, למרות את
לתת לו details, little bit, פדיקור מניקור.
צאנו הבנה, let's go pay עמוד בית חבר'ה, says the ברייתא, המוציא שיער, how much hair to be חייב on Shabbat. That's very interesting. I was thinking about this in Mitzrayim. Remember the psukim in Mitzrayim talk about that the Mitzrayim stopped giving them teven for the bricks.
כן.
אני לא הבנתי את זה בכל החיים שלי. מה teven לבריקס? teven is straw and bricks is hard. But כנראה אתה שם הרבה דברים בתוך הזהו and you make it. So it's similar. It's an interesting thing. So it's a similar thing here. The Gemara explains how much se'ar, it's not teven, but it's a similar idea. Apparently, לשים שיער בתוך הטיט, בתוך הכלי, זה מחזיק את הכלי.
This is exactly when you see today with the building, the עמודים של הבניין, they don't put just cement, it's gonna fall. They put the metal in between and it's holding. The same thing, the straw, it's make it hold it.
שיער.
גם שיער זה, it's
משהו, somehow it strengthens the clay.
Without it, it's gonna
משהו כזה.
break.
So that's the חשיבות. Says the ברייתא, המוציא שיער, hair, כדי לגבל בו את הטיט. How much hair is enough that they would mix into clay? So Tosfot jumps up and he says, how much is that? So he says, remember we said how much mayim shofchim is chashuv? Enough
לגבל בו את הטיט.
How much water was that? A revi'it. Because that's how much water, that's how much clay you'll make mitchila. You'll make the amount of clay legabel bo et hatit with a revi'it of mayim shofchim. So he says it's the same measure here. However much seyar, so that's what explains that. However much seyar that they would put into one batch of clay to make mitchila, that's seyar, that's chashivut. Okay, continues the Braita, tit, and how much tit? And we actually said this before. Lasot pikor shel tzofei zahav. If you remember, we said the clay itself had chashivut be'etzem in itself, enough to just put around the pikor of tzofei zahav, those people that melt metal and the gold. Why? Because that already was considered a small amount. But mitchila would have to be more hair or more water, like we explained, because you wouldn't make that amount of tit mitchila, you would make more than that. Yalla, let's go ahead. Now, this is the end of the Mishnah. Next point here. We had 3 shitot about sid. This very interesting thing happens to be. It's hot in here, no? The air is not working again.
אתה פה?
אני לא חושב שזה working.
בוא ניתן טוב.
I don't know what's going on. They're trying to heat us out. Get us in the... I don't know. Okay. עכשיו, at the end of the
מגיע לך
Mishnah...
רבי?
Yeah, but let it go around. עכשיו, we had at the end of the Mishnah, a machlokit about seed. This is very interesting. מה זה seed? Seed. What is a seed? Seed is, in English, it's called lime. Lime, זה לא fruit lime.
הלבן הזה.
כן, exactly.
The white
It's more a white plaster.
seed, כן.
Sometimes they use it in binyan.
It's not similar to cement?
It is, something like that. It's a similar idea. Building, but also we're going to see the girls used to use this for beautification. What for what? So we're going to see there's 2 things they actually used to use it for. One was to remove hair, remove their hair, כמו waxing היום, כנראה. Or to smooth out hairs, we're going to see. And the other thing was להאדים את הבשר. It would make their flesh, their skin, like red. Like to bring out color in their skin. You know?
Like tanning machines?
Like some mashu kaze, something like that. There were 2 reasons. One is for the hair, the remover to smooth it out. The other was it would bring the blood to the surface, and it would, like Kimo putting on mascara, like to give color to the skin. That was the other reason. Achshav, we had 3 shitot in the Mishnah. How much is chashivut for this seed? If you want to take a look, Ayin Chetem would bet it was like this. Seed. So Tanakama said, Kidei lasud tana shebebanot. This was Tanakama. Kidei lasud ktana shebebanot. What does that mean?
מה זה קטנה?
So מה זה קטנה?
קטנה אמרנו גיל 10 עד 12.
As ktana, either it means the young girl, or it could mean a small part of the young girl. There's, like we had by Ever Katan, if you remember by oil, similar diyun. So here, seed, kidei lasud ktana shebebanot, we're going to talk about what Tanakama means first. And then we had 2 more shitot. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kidei lasod kilkul, enough to make a kilkul, which is a temple. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, kidei lasud undapi. Now we're going to figure out what those 2 shitot also mean, so that Hashem we get them. But let's see. Says the Gemara. Seed kidei lasud ktana shebebanot. Now what does that mean? Says the Gemara. Tana, kidei lasud etzba ktana shebebanot. Enough to put on the small finger of the banot. So we're going to see, as the Gemara continues, when the girls would put on this type of seed to remove hairs, for example, or to smooth out hairs, they wouldn't put it all on at one time. זה היה סכנה.
זה חומר חריף.
זה סכנה, למה אני ראיתי, Arts will explain, is that if they put it all at one time, it raises the body temperature. And it could be dangerous, we're going to see
Like they
later.
can burn or something?
So they would only put one limb at a time. So therefore, what's considered chashivut? Kidei lasud etzba ktana shebebanot, the small limb of the girls, let's say the pinky, the small finger of the girls, that amount has chashivut for sid because that's what they would do separately. Beautiful. Rashi says, because dechen lasud dakan lasud et kol haguf la'adim. Rashi throws that in here for the reddening aspect. We're going to see later there's another element to this as well. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So zeh shita shel Tanna Kama. Enough seed to put on one small finger. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Bnot Yisrael shehigiu lepirkan. It's a fascinating thing. The Jewish girls, when they reached pirkan. Now pirkan means puberty. Maza puberty means
Machzor?
What?
Machzor? Period?
Oh, so what? How do you know puberty? So in halacha, or in reality, we're saying is when they start to grow hair in their private area. That's the siman of puberty. So the story is like this: She'igiu lepirkan, if they reached puberty, v'lo igiu l'shanim. Very interesting, but they hadn't reached the age of puberty yet. Dainu, they reached puberty too young. So now they're growing hair in their private area, but it doesn't look so normal because they're too young. So they wanted to remove that hair.
They're still underage, but they are very mature for their age?
Physically. Exactly. As they wanted to remove that hair because it looked a little muzar, it looked strange. So the Gemara tells us the different levels of wealth of the girls, they would remove the hair in different ways. Very interesting. That's what they used to do. So the girls who were of poor families, toflot otan besid, they would smear this seed that we're talking about on the hairs to remove them. Smear it and remove it. Benot ashirim, the wealthy girls, toflot otan besolet, they would use some sort of a flour water mixture.
Semolina?
Solet is flour, but they would use some sort of a flour mixture also to remove the hair. I guess it was less uncomfortable, kanere. Benot melachim, and the princesses, toflot otan b'shemen amor, they would use myrrh oil, and that would also remove the hair, and that was the way they would fix the problem. Tosfot happens to be, throws in over here, what does it mean, samuch lepirkan? Is perush b'samuch lepirkan, shekrovot le'inaseh. They used to get married much younger. They weren't getting married today like 22 years old.
12.
שקרובות להינשא ועושות כדי לייפות וללבן עצמן.
איפה זה רש"י?
Tosfot. He says that they wanted to beautify themselves to get married. I guess they used to get married then at 12 years old or 11 years old. Memela, they would do this when they were samuch lapirkan because Memela, that was when they would get married. Fine. Shenemar. Now what's this idea of Shemen Amor, the last thing we mentioned?
הוא רוצה ללבן את ביתו ישכן החלב ויאכילנה אפרוחים.
It says something interesting. Okay, fine. Sorry. It says in Megillat Esther, we know the story, is that Achashverosh gathered all the women in the kingdom and he did a test, a b'china. What was the b'china? Uba'al et kol hanashim, everyone one night after another, and then he decided who he wanted to marry. That was his Zaya b'china shelo. Rasha zeh. As Kitzu, whatever, the Gemara in Megillah talks more about this. Kitzu.
כן, נו, שזה סרט הייתה ש"ד בכלל, שיצא כמו שיוסף עשה, או השרה אימנו עשתה.
יש כזה שיטה, כן. Kitzu, it says before the girl would go in, she would do achanot. And what does it say? שנאמר, מגילת אסתר, it says, 6 חודשים בשמן עמו. For 6 months, she was treated with this שמן עמו. My שמן עמו, what is it? So we have a few explanations. Avuna Bachi Amar Setakat. Setakat is some sort of a perfumed oil. And Reiti, somebody says it was balsam oil, a very fragrant oil to remove the hairs or smooth the hairs, and that's what they used to use. If they would pick the olives before they reached a third of the growth, I mean they picked it when it was raw, not raw, underripe. Apparently that would make very fragrant oil.
Really?
Yeah, apparently, and that would be good for this purpose of smoothing or removing hair. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda says in a Braita, on Pekinon, we talk about this, on Pekinon, Shemin Zayit Shelo Yashlish. Actually, that's the term used for the Shemin Zayit that wasn't a third of its growth yet. V'lama sachinoto, says the Gemara, why would they use this oil, the Shemin Amo? What was the purpose of it? Shemishir et hase'ar u'ma'aden basar. So like we said, it removes or smooths the hairs, and it causes the basar to ma'aden, to glow, to become more beautiful. That was the purpose of this Shemin Hamo. Now, the Gemara tells us a story relating to this. Rav Bibi, so Yahoya Amora, Rav Bibi, Avilei Bavta, he had a daughter, and she was close to the age of getting married, so he wanted to beautify her. So the Gemara says, what did he do? מלשון הגמרא, it's משמע, הוא היה עושה את זה. זה מעניין, because לא הייתי חושב שזה היה יפה לאמורה, אפילו לגבר בעלמא, כאילו, בכלל. אוקיי, אבל תפלה עבר. He would smear on his daughter, on each limb, one at a time, to remove the hair. Or to
שמן עמוק?
This stuff.
Seed אומרים פה.
Seed. He used the seed in order to remove the hair and beautify her. Now, again, like I said, I'm not really sure why he was doing this.
אולי הוא לא היה נשוי, אולי אשתו נפטרה.
Maybe he couldn't.
Also, I think so because it could be because it's very dangerous. You have to be responsible for what you're doing.
That is true.
לאט, you know, איבר.
That's what he was
somebody can put all the way, can get sick and
right. So and Enochinami, I guess you want to say he took a chayut for his daughter, maybe. So the Gemara says what happened. She became so beautiful that everybody wanted to marry her, and he was able to find a husband who was willing to pay a huge amount to give the father in order to marry her up. It sounds like not a politically correct Gemara, but Shakal ba arba me'ot zuzi. He was able to take, because of her, 400 zuz. Meaning is that somebody was able, one of the husband, which the Mefarshim speak out, who was Hagun, he found a perfectly wonderful husband, but he was willing to pay 400 zuz to the father in order to marry her because she was so beautiful. That was what ended up happening. So what happened? There was a guy in the neighborhood who saw what Rabbi Bibi had done. So he said, you know what? I want to do, אני רוצה לעשות אותו דבר. What's that? Exactly. He also had a daughter, this guy. He didn't have patience.
That's why.
So what happened? He did this process with the seed on one time, and as the Mefarshim speak out, it raised the body temperature, and the daughter died. Hanochi hazeh, he did it all at one time. He didn't have patience to do ever like Bibi did, because he wanted the same outcome. Vameta.
But the Nochi did it.
The Nochi. His daughter, הבת שלו. So then the Nochi said, Katav Rav Bibi lebarti. Blamed on Rav Bibi. Rav Bibi killed my daughter. Bibi didn't kill his daughter. He did something silly he shouldn't have done. Rav Nachman said, actually, this whole idea of using this seed for removing hair, really it's only nogeh to Rav Bibi. Why? His daughters are particularly hairy. Lama, they're particularly hairy. Rav Bibi the shati shichra. In the house of Rav Bibi, shotim bira. They drink beer. So ba'ayin bante tafla, Rashi says, hasheichal mashchir u'marbeh se'ar. Beer drinking causes the hairs to get dark and increase. So his house, they needed to do that because his daughters had a lot of hair.
Look at the people in England. They are still blonde and have a lot of hair.
I'm not sure exactly what the pshat in this is. Anan, but Rav Nachman said, we don't drink beer, so lo ba'ayin bantan tafla, we don't need to do this process with the seed, because anyways, our girls don't have such hairy bodies, and therefore it's not necessary.
Okay.
Ma'anyen, just something interesting to say, is like Marab Mesechet Sanhedrin says that the first, at least the Bayit Rishon, the Jewish girls didn't have hair.
We said it here.
We didn't say it here. Where?
Said here that it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful.
Oh, exactly.
They didn't have hair growing over there.
Exactly.
And the whole world were talking about how beautiful the Jewish people.
Wait, it was. Oh, maybe it was here. I thought it was Sanhedrin. The Bayit Rishon.
Was that?
Months and a half ago.
The Bayit Rishon.
About months and a half ago.
So ma'anyen, meaning the Metziut was different. A very interesting thing.
Special.
Ma'od ma'anyen. You see, I mean, this is one of the examples where the physical,
Mamash.
is reflective of the Ruchaniyut. You see that. One of the examples of this is in the Torah. Why the Torah says all the time, Sarah was beautiful, Rivka was beautiful. The answer is because then the physical reflected the depth, what's inside. So really what it's saying is that they were on a level that the Avot HaKadoshim, you were able to see like, wow, these women are Royot to be the Imaot. I mean, that's really the idea. Ayom it's much more difficult because we're so fake, so it's harder to tell. You see someone who looks beautiful, but it doesn't mean necessarily.
3/4 of it is fake.
I'm not just talking about plastic surgery, Bechlal we're fake. We fool ourselves, we fool other people. We don't live b'derech hayashar v'atov, meaning, so whatever, kids, anyways, right. Zaya Tanakam. As the Tanakam Omer, what is the measure of seed? Liot chayav is enough seed Lasud etzbak tana shebebanot, the small finger. Okay, that was the shita of Tanakam. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda Omer kidei lasud kilkul. He said enough to put plaster, to put this plaster on a kilkul. Now we in the Mishnah we explain maza kilkul. Kilkul is the temple. So it's over here, the part over here. To smooth out the hair
temple?
Of the temple. It's da'a. We're going to see in the Gemara. The temple.
רכה, לא?
נכון.
And Rabbi Nechemia said, מה?
רכה, נכון. אבל למה גם אצדעה? שלא.
Rabbi Nechemia said,
מצדיעים אולי?
And Rabbi Nechemia said, andipi. מה זה andipi? So we'll see in the Gemara now what exactly these things are. Kilkul ve'andipi. Let's see. So my kilkul and my andipi. What are these two things? So Amar Rav says like this. Rav says, מה זה kilkul? Kilkul is צידעה. הצדעה you called it, but
צידעה מהצד.
הטמפל. קוראים את זה טמפל.
גם רכה, הנה.
טמפו או טמפול?
טמפל. כמו טמפל.
כמו בית מקדש?
כן, טמפל, זה אותו מילה, כן.
אוקיי.
כמו טמפל, כן. טמפל, זה צידעה, זה הקלקול שרבי יהודה אומר. יהודה אומר, קלקול זה צידעה. Enough hair to smooth, enough seed, סליחה, to smooth out the hair of the temple. And what is the andipi, excuse me, of Rabbi Nechemia? Ubat tzid'ah. Ma ze bat tzid'ah? Literally means the daughter of a temple. It means the little hairs, that's how Rashi explains, under the temple. So it's less. The little hairs underneath, that's how much Rabbi Nechemia would say, Tachayav l'Shabbat. So now it comes out like this. Let's stop for a second. Lefi zeh, what comes out? Tanakama said, Kedei lasud, etzbak tana shebebanot. Okay? Is that the biggest measure or the smallest measure?
אצבע קטנה.
אצבע קטנה, זה היה השיטה של התנא-קמא. לפי רבי יהודה, מה השיעור?
Probably it's less.
לפי זה, לפי רב.
For sure it's less.
צידעה says a temple.
It's less.
So it sounds like less, right? And then you have the final measure, which seems to be...
Here, no?
Which is even less than that. Which Rabbi
פה
Nechemia says,
מתחת.
right, lower than the temple, which is even less, כנראה. Fine. Lememra says the Gemara, remember we said the machlokes, Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, that Tanakama held usually the larger measure, and Rabbi Yehuda held the smallest measure.
It's more מחמיר, Rabbi Yehuda.
As the kashi, exactly. Lememra, this would imply the shiurad Rabbi Yehuda nafish comes out. The Gemara is assuming in the Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda is always the most machmir, but he's not the most machmir. Who's the most machmir here?
Rabbi Nechemia.
Nechemia. We always say the Rabbanan are more machmir. It's larger and they're more mekil. So how can you say over here?
איפה רבי נחמיה?
Who השיטה השלישית?
זוטם לרבנן.
So the Gemara answers. So again, so what's the kasha? You see from here, Rabbi Yehuda holds larger than the measure of Nechemia, but l'chara he's supposed to be the most machmir. So the Gemara answers not a kasha. We said Rabbi Yehuda is more machmir than Tanakama.
כן.
But it could be he's more mekil than another shita, which in this case is Rabbi Nechemia.
Yeah.
Be'etzim it comes out he's the middle shita. That's okay. Zuta midrabanan, he holds smaller than the Rabbanan. V'nafish b'Rabbi Nechemia, and it's larger than Rabbi Nechemia. But there's zero stira. He's not the most machmir necessarily. He's just more machmir when there's two hishtam shuyot, like the lesser amount, because he's more machmir like that. Beautiful. Kibanu etzeh. As Achshav, how are we explaining kilkul? Kilkul is the temple. And how are we explaining andipi?
The under the temple.
Is under the temple. Says the Gemara, the problem is the lashon doesn't work elsewhere. We're going to show a braita that seems to say that can't be the pshat in those words. Why? Because the pshat is from a braita. The braita says, Rebbe explains this the machlok. He says, Amar Rebbe. Rebbe says like this. Mir'in, we're talking about the Mishnah. Nirin Dera Rabbi Yehuda, when Rabbi Yehuda says Kedei Lasur Kilkul, his words seem to be Bechavut. There's different types of this seed. There's seed that they would mix with more water, and it was more dissolved, it was more liquidy. And then there's also a type of seed that's more thick, more of a clump. So says Rabbi.
No, why thick? It's thinner because it's more liquidy.
It's one kind.
יש seed שהם היו מערבים בתוכה הרבה מים, וזה היה יותר dissolved, יותר liquidy, אבל גם היה seed שהיה יותר
it's thicker, so you have to put more water.
Samich. It was more thick. It was more like a clump. So says Rabbi says like this, Nir'in dir Rabbi Yehuda, that the Shita Rabbi Yehuda makes sense, what? B'chavut. With a thinner, liquidy type of seed. Why? Because that's what's good for the temple. Now that makes sense. Let me say that. V'divrei Rabbi Nechemya bebitzat hasid. And Rabbi Nechemya's shita seems to make sense with the thicker type of seed. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Rabbi is saying the shita of Rabbi Nechemya makes sense, which is the way we're understanding. The Rav explained it, is under the temple. The small hair is under the temple. Bebitzat hasid. The problem with that is the area under the temple. For sure, they would use a liquid type of seed. So it can't be that Andipi in the Mishnah means under the temple, because then what Rebbe is saying doesn't make sense. Let's read it inside and I'll explain it.
I thought it's opposite.
The way you're explaining it, Rav, that Kilkul is tzida is the temple, and Andipi is below the temple, chavut. So then both of them should really be chavut, maze chavut, the dissolved one. You're talking about if really what Kilkul and Andipi means is the temple and below the temple, they both need to be using the liquid measure. So therefore, that's what they used to use. I don't know Lama. But they couldn't use a thick measure for this, a thick seed. A thick seed wasn't appropriate to use under the temple. So it must be that that's not the pshat in Kilkul and Andipi. It must be a different pshat. So therefore the Gemara says another pshat. Let's see. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, Amud Rabbi Ami Andipa. Now Rashi has two pshatim. We'll go with the first pshat Rashi brings. Maze Andipa. Andipa means a kli with two piyot, shtei piyot. What does it mean? Rashi explains it. It's Rashi Andipa. You see Rashi? Andipa? Maze Andipa. Lecheres velo shnei dadim. Achat lemala v'achat lemata. Okay, as you know those barrels that they use for beer, like the kegs. Yes. You know the kegs that they use for beer? Yes. So they have two spouts, one below and one above. וכשרוצה למלאותו, סותם את הדד התחתון, the spout that's below. בלשון אנדיפי יש שתי פיות. So what does it mean? It means like this. It says, this is the second pshat. This is Rav Kahana. Slicha, this is רבי יצחק, עודבי רבי עמי, האנדיפה. זה הפשט ברבי נחמיה. מה זה אנדיפה? זה לשון, מה זה אנדיפה? אנדיפה ששאמר רבי נחמיה. סליחה. כן. What did he say in the Mishnah? אנדיפה, זה היה לשון שלו? אנדיפה?
אנדיפי.
אונדפי is אנדיפה. מה זה אנדיפה? Andipa has nothing to do with what the girls put on their skin. Because this plaster had a different use also.
So it's similar to the... What did he say before in the...
To fix the cracks?
To fix the cracks?
I mean, here it's a different purpose. What did they use the seed for? They also used it to fill up the lower spout of the barrel when they would fill it up with wine or beer.
So it's a bigger amount compared to the...
So that small amount that they would use as a cork, basically, so that it doesn't come out, that's the amount that Rabbi Nechemya holds your chayav for Hotzah on Shabbat. And now it makes sense why it's the thicker type, like Rebbe said. Because what are they putting? They're not liquid. They're not putting liquid seed inside. They're putting the thicker one. So now we understand the shita of Rabbi Nechemya.
But is it more or less?
The seed ידוע כמונע חדירת מים.
What does that mean?
A seed known is something to
stop the flow of the water.
Yeah, because it's
exactly. The problem is the Gemara says this also can't be the pshat. Why not? Because what do you put in the barrel? Yayin. Yayin will burn through this. Yayin is strong. It'll burn through this. So that can't be the pshat because that's not a good use for it. So says the Gemara, Matkif Rav Kahana v'chiyadam oseh ma'otav an parot. Is a person going to put his money for a loss? Da'ainu, ulo sam this plaster into that hole to stop it up because the wine is going to burn right through it. Okay, but I guess that was the normal thing. They would put wine. So kanireh, that's not the pshat Rabbi Nechemi because that's not a normal use. That's not a chashivut for it. So Elam Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana is the third pshat, the final pshat. This is accepted, and he says shnatot. Very interesting. Maza shnatot. Well, actually, there's going to be one more pshat, but shnatot is demarcations. Yala and barrels that they would have k'mo measuring cups. You know, when you cook in the kitchen, you take in a measuring cup, and it says quarter of a cup, half a cup, third. It goes. So what they had these little things that were bolet, that would little lines that would emerge, and they would take this sid, which was a bright color, in order to mark those places so that you saw how much is each measure. So that amount to make demarcations, to make these simanim, that's what's sufficient in order to be chayav for hotza'ah. That's the pshat. Shnatot means markings. That's what it's for. Where do we find this idea? Kedetnan, the Mishnah Masechet Menachot teaches us. The medaber shama nesachim shel yayin. When they brought korbanot, they also brought yayin as nesachim. Maz nesachim in English it's called libations. They would pour wine ima korbanot. So it says there they had a kli. Shnatot ayu bahin. They had a shnatot, these markings in this kli that was a hin size. And it was marking off ad kan lepar. This is how much wine you need for the par, for the bull offering. Ad kan le'ayil, ad kan le'keves. For each one, it marked off kama yayin ata tzarich le'nesachim for each one. Just a raya that this idea of shnatot, what it refers to, that's the pshat nandipi according to Rabbi Nechemia. That's the third answer.
So basically, it's for measurement.
Exactly, the amount of seed they would
like
use.
You have this measurement cup. So they used to
Exactly.
use seed.
It was like a bright color. You could look and see clearly what this was. Beautiful. Final pshat. My antipa. Antipa is aputa. Antipa is aputa. Maza aputa. Puta is the forehead. Maza forehead is that they used to put the seed on the forehead back of the girls in order to make it red. That it was like bright
blush.
Color. Like blush. Kmo blush. So that's the Shamshut that Rabbi Nechemia said is chashuv for hotza'ah. Where do we find that that's the reference? Very interesting story. The Gemara says there was a certain person from Galil, from the north. He went to Bavel. And he knew, אנשים שם, הם ידעו שהוא היה יודע, he knew מעשה מרכבה. מעשה מרכבה זה תחילת ספר יחזקאל. וזה נבואה ברמה הרבה גבוה, very very high נבואה שהיה ליחזקאל, מעשה מרכבה. Why? יחזקאל talks about the מלאכים and הכיסא של הקדוש ברוך הוא, הקדוש ברוך הוא בעצמו, והגמרא במסכת חגיגה אומרת שאסור לדרוש במעשה מרכבה רק אם יש תנאים מדויקים. There's specific תנאים in order to teach Maaseh Merkava. Why? Because we're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmo. You have to know exactly what's going on. And the Gemara there says one of the things is you're not allowed to be Doresh Berabim. You could maybe teach individuals one-on-one, and also then it's only B'Rashei Prakim. There's specific Tnaim. But Stam Lidrosh Maaseh Merkava. העניינים האלו זה דברים that עומדים ברומו של עולם. This is big thing.
Yoram said one time in Shul, I was in Israel, he said, if somebody can explain me something from Yechezkel Navi, I'm going to be a slave in Neder.
Yeah. I'm asking.
And he was so humble.
Right.
When Hashem told him, someone said, Rabbi Hashem, I don't know anything.
אבל he was punished for
So he
that.
answered like that, and he's so great, שם עליו רוח להחיות העצמות.
אבל Hashem was not happy with that.
With what?
When he told him, אתה ידעת, it was kind of like tricky answer.
הנבואה של העצמות?
החזון העצמות הישב ויבשות,
הוא אמר לו, בהתחלה אני לא יודע כלום.
בן אדם.
בן אדם. Yeah, the kids, so what's the point? You see in that story, this person from Galil came to Bavel, ואמרו לקום דרוש לנו במעשה מרכבה, ואנשים שם אמרו, אנחנו רוצים לשמוע קבלה. Teach us, and היום. That's probably the problem today. I mean, certain times you do find this phenomenon. זה לא אותו דבר, חס ושלום להגיד לשון הרע, אבל היום אנשים רוצים לשמוע דברים שהם באמת לא מבינים כלום. תלמוד קצת מראה, תלמוד קצת חומש, תלמוד קצת הלכה, ואחרי זה תלך ללמוד קבלה. אבל שמה זה אסור, ממש אסור. So the people said to him, teach us מעשה מרכבה לגליל הזה. אמר לו, he said to them, הדרוש לכו כדדרש רבי נחמיה לחברי. I will teach you, like Rabbi Nehemiah used to teach his friend. Okay, but that was the difference. רבי נחמיה היה בקיא במעשה מרכבה, והוא לימד, החבר שלו, והוא לימד אותו באופן הישר, in the right way.
No.
He was darshaning in public. So what happened? Hashem caused ונפקה על איתה מן כותל ומחתי באנדיפי ומית. A hornet, אתה יודע מה זה hornet? Like a little bug with a stinger came out, came off the wall, stung him ba'andipi in his forehead, and he died. So this is the why he brought it. It's a raya in the forehead. Andipi is forehead. It's the raya to us. But the point is, the people said, min delay dalay. Because of him, he was caught. This was caused.
How did you call this fly?
Hornet.
Hornet.
It's like a wasp. Hornet. Similar thing. So min delay dalay. Rashi says miado aita. Min delay miado dalay. Miado ze happened to him. Why? Because he shouldn't have done this. The Josh berabim kacha. So we see that that's referring to that's referring to the forehead. It's that point. I don't understand 100% today why. Sometimes you find, especially Baalei Tshuva, that the first thing they're going to learn is like Kabbalah, that they don't even understand the smallest. I'm just saying, like there's so much to learn, basic things. I don't really understand why they jump so quickly. It's just I don't know that.
פתאום מתחילים לדבר איתך על קליפות
Right.
וגלגולים וסטרא אחרא ובמשימים.
זה לא אותו דבר, אבל that's ממש אסור.
זה כל זה קורה שן רע.
ובאים לך בתנועות ובניקלה ובנים, אתה מסתכל עליו.
אני חושב שיותר כיף יכול להיות, לא יודע.
מה יותר כיף?
בשבילי זה יותר כיף, אני לא יודע, כאילו, אני לא יודע. קיצור, לא יודע, ביתה. Says the Mishnah, let's go, I want to go, if we get to the bottom, let's go. That's the Mishnah. So אנחנו ממשיכים לדבר על different things, and the shiurim for הוצאה בשבת. אדמה is red clay. So this is a specific type of clay, שזה אדום. It's a red clay.
In Israel they have it a lot, it's כל אדמה אדומה.
Right, red clay.
אתה מכיר את זה שמשתמש בגינות.
כן.
They use it for the gardens.
Like fertilizer. כמו זבל?
לא. It's... I wouldn't say, I don't call it.
The red clay.
Like mud, but
yeah,
not...
yeah,
it's
red.
more red.
זה red, כן. כחותם המרצופים. Dear Rabbi Akiva says how much? Enough to seal a cargo sacks. So Rashi says that the people who used to do business, they would ship their merchandise. They would ship the prakmatya shalahem. And they would seal the bags holding their merchandise with this red clay. So the amount of red clay to seal the cargo bag, the shipment, that's the amount of chashivut. Dear Rabbi Akiva. Chachamim omrim kechotam ha'igrot. The Chachamim are cholek, they hold a smaller amount. Is enough to seal a letter. Right? You seal a letter, you also use this red clay, but it's a smaller amount, they're more machmir. Yada, weiter. Zevel v'chol hadak, we actually quoted this earlier. Zevel is manure, fertilizer. Chol hadak is a thin sand. Kedei lezavel klach shel kruv divrei Rabbi Akiva. We had this before also, we quoted it. Enough to fertilize a stalk of cabbage. Chachamim omrim kedei lezabel krisha, enough to fertilize krisha. In English it's called a leek. It's a vegetable. Okay. Smaller. Chol hagas. Chol hagas is a thicker sand. Now this thicker sand was not useful for fertilizer. So what is the chashivut? So we're going to see in the Gemara, they would put this chol hagas into the plaster. Em hayu samim et ze betoch ha-plaster l'ishtamesh bebinyan. They would mechazek the plaster. So, how much of this chol hagas, this thick sand, is chashuv? Kedei liten al mlo kaf si. In order to put a full amount on, in English, this is called a trowel. Maze trowel, a thick, the amount, it's basically like a shovel. I'm sure you've seen this before. You pull up a picture if you want to chap it. I just looked it up. Maze trowel, because it's kedai to see. It's something they used for making plaster. Hello? That the people that made it plaster the walls.
Mastarina.
You know, so that's it. How much of this to be chayav?
Use it on Friday.
You used it?
I use it on Friday.
What do you use it for?
I see all of a sudden, נמלים באים מהתקרה מחור.
Okay.
I said, right now close it, because we take the seed, גיבל את זה וסתמנו את החורים. זה נקרא מסטרינה.
So that's it. How much this chol ha'av, this thick sand, is that amount that you would put to mix with plaster in one shovelful. One full, that's the amount of chashivut.
Shlichta.
Yalla. Weiter. Kaneh is a reed. So now what they used to use reeds for, so one of the things they used it for was for kulmus. Kulmus is a pen that they used to use. Kedei la'asot kulmus, in order to make a pen. V'im haya ava o merusas. Now if the reed was either thick or cracked, so you can't use it for a pen, so what do they use it for? Then they would use it for fuel. They would put it in the fire. So what's the smallest amount that has chashivut of fuel? This is an interesting geder. Kedei levashel bo beitzah kala shebeitzim. In order to roast, to cook, the quickest cooking egg, tufa that is scrambled, unetuna be'ilfas that's put in the pot, put in the pan. So the Gemara is going to explain what exactly is the quickest cooking egg. What are we talking about here? What is the quickest cooking egg? And also, what does it mean exactly?
Kushkeshet.
So we're going to see exactly what this is. You probably, if that's what you do in the restaurant, I don't know if it's the same thing. But the kitsu, that is the, and put in the pot means we're going to actually see it, where it's preheated pots. It's a very short amount of time. The fuel used for that process, that's how much of this kaneh that's broken is chashuv on Shabbat. We have to stop here? 11, yeah, we have to stop. You have to go. We'll pick up at the Gemara, B'ezrat Hashem.
יפה מאוד.
Gemara, the bottom day Amud Bet. B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow.
תודה.
Aleph Amud Aleph. Everyone have a wonderful day.
חזק וברוך, שיפמן.
ברוך תהיה. ברוך תהיה.
The last Mishnah is a little bit complicated. I didn't really get the whole idea.
We'll go over it tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem.